Well, hi, everyone. Great to be part of the efforts this week with Cyber Dialogue in Davos. I'm 𝗕𝗲𝗻𝗄𝗃. I'm a Vice President of Cybersecurity Specialist at MasterCard. And today we have joining with us from Dallas, which we're both based in, George Finney. George, how are you?
I'm doing awesome, Leah. How are you?
Good. So let's see, we have a couple minutes with you. And while we do, can you give us a quick introduction and background on you?
Well, first, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you to for doing the interview, and thanks to the Cyber Future Foundation for hosting us. So I'm George Finney. If you don't know me, I'm the Chief Security Officer for Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. But probably better known for some of the cybersecurity books I've written. Most recently, Project Zero Trust, where I collaborated with 𝗕tože to kind of tell a fictional story about a company that goes through their zero trust journey, but they use 𝗕tože design methodology and maturity model around zero trust. And I think what I love doing in cyber is really kind of taking some of the things that we do every day and making them simple and more approachable, both for new folks coming into cyber, as well as some of the non-technical folks that we have to build partnerships and relationships with, whether it's HR or leadership teams or CFOs. So I'm just passionate that I think people are our secret weapon when it comes to cybersecurity.
Thanks for that great background, and I've got to get a hold of that latest book on zero trust. And so in terms of the topics that the folks will be speaking on and going over this week at Cyber Dialogue, what's the topic of interest primarily for you of all the topics this week?
Gosh, I think zero trust this is the year that it's going to take off. I mean, obviously, it's the biggest buzzword right now in cybersecurity. But I think something changed last year when President Biden issued his executive order on zero trust. Whereas before we didn't really hear a lot of practitioners or CISOs talking about zero trust. Now that it's kind of out on the table, everybody's talking about it and actually starting to do something about it. So I'm anxious to hear from other leaders where they're at in their journeys, and also to help break down the myths or misconceptions. Right, a lot of people kind of have, I think, dismissed zero trust as one of those buzzwords that doesn't mean anything. And actually, as a strategic approach, it really, has changed organizations. It's one of the reasons that I can be here and talk to you today, literally, without having to go down and do firefighting. I think it really has shaped the way we do things here. And gosh, just excited to hear other folks talk about it.
No, thanks, George. And you kind of touched on what the next question is around the major trends that you see this year, right? We're still in January. It's still early on. You talked a little bit about what you see coming for zero trust. Anything else that you want to share with us on the major trends that you think we'll see this year in the next 12 months?
My hope is I'm an optimistic CISO, but my hope is that the economy starts to turn around, right? And that's impacted budgets for everyone everywhere. And I think one of the things that we've seen in security is we're not seeing a lot of cuts in security. In fact, we're maybe adding people, whereas our infrastructure teams are maybe losing people. And that makes it so hard to build partnerships and relationships where they're like, you're getting people, and I'm losing mine. But honestly, it's the IT people, it's the infrastructure teams that have to do a lot of the work around things like zero trust or just basic things like patching. So gosh, I'm really excited to see things turn around, and for folks to be able to be proactive rather than just reactive when it comes to cyber threats.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for your optimism, George, and sharing the insights from your view and your lens. We very much appreciate it. Thanks for being here with us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Leah.
Of course. Okay, next I think we have up Chris Painter.
Hey, how are you? Nice to
Hi,
meet you.
Chris. Good. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Good. Look at that behind you. Data center operations, whatever that may be.
It's actually the original computer from Bletchley Park that broke the Lorenz code, the higher level Nazi code. It's the first digital electronic programmable computer in the world, but they kept it secret to the mid-70s, so they lost any commercial advantage.
Oh, okay. There we go. That's quite a good background. So can you give us a little bit of, introduce yourself in terms of your background in a couple minutes and to catch everyone up who may not know you?
Great. Well, I've been doing cyber in various capacities for about 33 years now. So for a long time, before there was a web, but not before there was an internet. I started as a prosecutor prosecuting high-tech crimes, including Kevin Mitnick, the hacker, and others back in the 80s and 90s. And then I went to the mothership at Maine Justice and ran the computer crime intellectual property section. Went to the FBI briefly, went to the White House, to the National Security Council, created the Cyber Directorate and the International Strategy for Cyberspace. Then became the world's first cyber diplomat at the State Department for about 6.5 years, focusing on all these different issues. And left there about 4 years ago. And now, among other things, and I do a bunch of different things now, I am the president of something called the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, which is a worldwide capacity building cyber capacity building organization based in The Hague, but has companies, civil society, and many countries as part of it.
Excellent. That is quite an impressive background. So as we look at
behind me, not my actual background, but
both are. No, the career background matches the scenic background there. But in terms of this week at Davos and some of the topics that they'll be discussing, what's the real big topic of interest to you?
Well, I mean, many topics, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there because there's so many topics that interest me. But I feel I should speak on what my organization does, my foundation does. Look, I know that there's a panel talking about workforce development and capacity building. That's obviously a critical linchpin, not just for companies, but for countries around the world. I mean, I think it's right. Following this now for as long as I have, I think we've always hoped that cybersecurity would finally become a real priority, a national security priority, an economic priority, a priority in the boardroom. And I think we've turned that corner. I think ransomware and other things have done that. But what we're not prepared for is we don't have the folks who can actually deal with this. And that's the subject of a panel this week, which I think is really important. But also what we also don't have is a lot of governments aren't prepared for this. They don't have the institutional setup. They don't have the coordination setup like the US does or the UK does. They don't have institutions like national level certs. And as I think it's axiomatic that we're only strong as the weakest link, that smart cyber criminals or nation states route their attacks through countries that don't have good capability and can't cooperate and don't have the ability to detect or work on these things. So I think it's in all of our interests, both governments, but also the private sector and others, to work together to try to raise the bar around the world. And that's something that's been going on. There's been lots of discussions in the UN about this. There have been other discussions about this. My organization is holding later this year, probably in September, a global conference where we're bringing together high-level folks from government, industry, civil society, to really jumpstart this issue, because I think it's critical. I view the capacity building part of this as the foundation to all the good things we're trying to achieve on the internet, but also combating all the bad things if we're going to be effective and do all the things our prior speaker talked about. Even at the boardroom and company level, we really need to get behind this. And so I think it's a real, it's something we can't sit on our hands about. And fortunately, I think the political willingness is finally there. We'll see. I'm still a little worried that things will slip off the radar again. I've seen that too many times where people get really excited about this for like 10 minutes when some big thing happens and it goes away. But I think we're past that.
Yeah, and certainly the geopolitical issues we saw last year going into this year have raised more of a light on cyber, which is good. But yeah,
well, and I think that was the whole Ukraine invasion certainly is a good example of that, where I think there was a false narrative around that cyber didn't play as big a role as people expected. And that's in part because, people said things like cyber 9/11s or cyber Pearl Harbor. And that's not, the reality. The reality is we're getting hit every day. And indeed, in the war in Ukraine, we saw Russia use cyber very effectively, not decisively, because they can actually use bombs. They don't have to use cyber to take out a power plant if they can use a bomb. But they did a lot to take out command and control in the beginning. And I think the most surprising thing has been the resilience of the Ukrainians. And again, that goes back to capacity building. They've been training for this for the last 8 years.
And so in the last couple seconds we have left, Chris, major trends that you see coming this year.
Yeah. It's always hard to predict this, but ransomware is not going away. I was part of a ransomware task force that chaired one a couple of years ago. This needs a sustained effort, so that's going to continue to be a big issue. I think, people breathe some of it a sigh of relief that Russia hasn't retaliated against U.S. companies and others. We're not out of the woods yet. I think Jen Easterly and others are right about shields up. I think that it's, it may be coming when the pain becomes too much for them. So let's not rest on our laurels on that either. I think the threat environment's going to continue to advance. The fortunate thing is I think we're better at working to blunt this, and things like the Cyber Futures conference, I think, helps bring people together to talk about this.
Excellent. Well, Chris, thank you so much again for joining us virtually and sharing your views and the great work that you're doing. Looking forward to hearing more from you throughout the week and this year.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. And I think, do I see Les here with us today?
Hey, Leah.
Hey, good to see you again. I know. Well, Les, welcome.
I'm wearing my purple book.
I love it.
Appropriate for this weather. Thank you.
Awesome. So where are you calling in from today?
From New York.
Okay. Well, so Les, for those who don't know you, give us a couple minutes of an introduction on yourself and your background.
Well, okay. I'm the global head of AppSec, and I also deal with cryptography at Estée Lauder companies. Also, I've been in the industry for a long time. And so I've done the whole gambit from the operational work, being a developer, hardcore developer, in assembly level, to networking, business continuity, and so on and so forth. And I've also leaned towards understanding business, so getting that business perspective as we mature and so on. I mean, I could go on, but just leave it at that. There's everybody else is also big.
Oh yeah. So the topics of that they'll be covering this week in Davos, of those topics, which one is of big interest to you?
Okay, there's several. One of them is actually the supply chain, and it's a bigger word for, it could be in terms of products, as well as it could be suppliers themselves and vendors and so on. But I'm going to take that tact as one. But there's another aspect from an AppSec perspective that is near and dear to me, and also the social part of things. So I'm going to try. How much time do I have first?
5 minutes total, so you probably have about 3 minutes left.
Okay, so let me go really quick. I don't think, because we're going to talk about 2023, right? I'm concerned about the social engineering aspect, so that's the awareness and the people aspect of things. And there's a big concern about that, because I don't think that's going to stop from ransomware and phishing and so on. And therefore, one has to create this champion program. And I think those lines are blurring between security and over time. And the reason is also because now with the economy and so on and so forth, there's a cutback on a lot of stuff. And there's a dearth already of practitioners, so we got to work on that. Okay, that's the solution kind of thing. From another aspect, from again, third party and so on and so forth products, I think we don't do a good job, and we should, in terms of cataloging. We tend to look in myopic chunks. So for example, we say, SBOM, we use, that's a big word, but that what used to be SBOM is, morphed into different aspects. Now you'd think in terms of what was one app is actually 1,000 microservices, for example, and those have libraries and so on. There's some really good work happening in the industry in open source, and there's some phenomenal people, and we can talk that in our open book sessions. But that is another big one that's happening, and I think we need to do a good job of correlating that, because otherwise it just ends up being like SBOM. It's a big word, and nobody really looks and doesn't know how to do it. But how do you address, once you have a library, for example, being used in a microservice, and if you say Log4j is an example, right, or anything else, how do you relate that and block and know exactly where that place is? So that's one aspect. The what I want to go. I have to go this. I can't say it. I feel so strongly about API security because today everything is code. And what we know of as web and, and all that stuff, we talk of OS top 10, but people think in terms of web, it's actually, there's also OS API top 10. And today everything is APIs. In fact, your Tesla or any other EV is actually another API engine, actually, is communicating, and all of them communicate, and we don't do a good job of, because of microservices. Again, everything communicates, all apps, everything, and it's actually focus of all innovation to APIs. And my take on this, again, solutioning it to that is start shield right. So start from the operational, because we don't have a clue of what we have, and then go back into the DevSec, the other part of it from development space. I can go into details, but that's my New York minute, if you will.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us and what you see coming in AppSec and this year. And I know that's a lot of room for more advancements, and I'm sure we'll see you around on other speaking circuits and this week virtually at Davos. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Leah, and the whole team there. Thank you.
Thank you, Les.